going to be having our presentations in a form of the commission. The first one will be on the options for infrastructure development.
So we went through an exercise as the group with regards to what infrastructure we're talking about, and one was ICT infrastructure. ICT infrastructure, you do need the backbone, you do need the reticulation all the way through into the zone for use by the investors. The next one was transport infrastructure, broken up into rail, road, pipeline, and pipeline segmenting into the various hydrocarbons you're likely to be transporting. And for ports, so we said sea and airports, in a way they work in mirror to each other with regards to, if you compare a berth to perhaps the aprons on the airports from the seaports. And then we spoke about energy power requirements, and we, in brackets, listing the various sources of this, be it electricity, be it coal, be it the various hydrocarbons with regards to gas, LNG and LPG. Because you've got your various sources of the energy and power generation. Now, depending on where that's from, be it if it's coal, if it's electricity, if it's gas, then that leads to different laws. So, for example, if you're talking about perhaps renewable energy, the source could well be at a municipal level or even falling into private sector with generation. But at some of them, so basically in the three categories in that sense of planning, distribution, and generation, it would depend on the source of your energy. And that's also good to look at in relation to the area that the SEZ is located, and therefore what is the nearest or most accessible source of energy for that zone. And then again, sort of pushing that a bit further, looking at options for zones to be able to generate their electricity themselves, if that actually would also make that a better enabling sort of policy decision, so to speak. That's it from my side. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's give you a quick round of applause. Any inputs from the group? Yes, ma'am.
I think the one thing that we also mentioned, especially on the funding options available for SEZ infrastructure, is that there should be consideration to giving the SEZs authority to go out into the capital market and borrow. Because currently there's limitations in terms of the law that actually allows them to do so. And there's great reliance on government to fund the SEZs. So that's one of the options that we're saying should be considered. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that input. Then you will have the second one, which will be enterprise development and empowerment.
The questions we were dealing with are the questions that say what role of the SEZ, what is the role of the SEZ in facilitating the development and empowerment of SEZs. We had to look at what strategies that can be employed by SEZs in order to integrate SMMEs in the value chain. What are the best ways of developing suppliers in the SEZs? The partnership models that can be developed in order to ensure that SMMEs also take part in an SEZ, what policy instruments that can be utilized, and also to make sure that in the whole program of an SEZ, SMME development forms an integral part of that. We said that all small distributed utilities within an SEZ should be run by SMMEs. The zone should form a platform for business development and financial access to all SMMEs. The SEZs should analyze the value chain of their investors as they approach the SEZ, so that they can proactively incubate SMMEs and have a strategy of how they are going to support those SMMEs to develop and to grow further. There was emphasis of partnerships with existing levels of government and all other stakeholders, so that to ensure that in the implementation of the district models, SMMEs and designated groups, the youth, the women, the people with disabilities are not left outside of the value chain. There's a thinking that SMMEs that supply whatever that they should supply within the zone, they also access incentives because they are part of the value chain. So that one is something that we need to take forward and make sure as to how it can be implemented, to make sure that SMMEs and designated groups are also developed.
Enkosi kakhulu, Mama Makibi. Please let's give her another big round of applause to appreciate her. Anything that you would want to add, the group that was in that robust debate?
I think we were very well covered by the notes. The only point we would emphasize from the Gauteng experience is the transparency thing isn't just an idle commitment. You've got to be very, very sure in creating access for SMMEs that you do not create gatekeeper conditions. If you look at what's happened to the 40% set-asides on construction, which was the point that we made, it's now evolved to such a toxic level with so-called business forums in communities. We actually now have a special police unit in Gauteng that is policing these groups that try to stop construction projects if they don't get this alleged 30-40%. Mm-hmm. So the whole point is not to only take people that nominate themselves as community leaders. I think the point that was made is that the SEZ can be a platform. That platform can include a number of entry points for firms of different sizes, and it can be an accelerator for groups of SMMEs as well.
The Department of Small Business and Development, are they here? What is the role of the small business, in that sense, just...
Thanks, Tammy. I don't think it's fair for the group to say the role of small business development, but I just want to add on what was discussed at the group. The fact that as we roll out, especially with this new approach, the updated approach of SEZ, we need to ensure that we do not compromise the transformation imperatives of the country, which includes inclusivity, especially of SMMEs, but those which are owned by the designated groups, so that it's not only pro-investors, but it's also pro-inclusivity. We don't need to compromise the imperatives.
So we can wait with great anticipation for an incentive from the small business development that will help the small businesses to locate and promote them to manufacture so that they can be part of the value chain. So we can wait for that incentive, right?
We can talk. Yeah. We can talk.
Okay, at least, we're just planting a seed, Then we go to number 3, which is the one on SEZ investment promotion and marketing. Thank you, Kashi.
Thanks, Tommy. So the first question was, what is the best way of aligning national investment promotion versus SEZ investment promotion? And it became clear, I think, also reflecting on yesterday's core theme was one coherent message enables that. And because when you share a coherent message, what you're actually doing is you're sharing intelligence. You're sharing knowledge that all of the different role players in investment promotion have. And I think that was also one of the key elements of the conversation in our group was that there are different role players. In the study led by the Presidency, InvestSA, and the World Bank in preparation for the first investment conference, they found that there are over 30 investment promotion agencies or who operate in that domain in South Africa. So the question of coherent messaging comes then vitally important. But then to not say we have too many institutions, but the one thing that came out in the conversation was that we need to use these institutions as resources for investment promotion because budgets are shrinking for each department, for each entity, in the tight fiscal environment that we find ourselves in, and also recognizing that each of these institutions have their own niche audiences and access. So, for example, we spoke a lot about DIRCO. They have economic representatives jointly with the DTI in each of the embassies that South Africa has. And so for them to be informed of the investment promotion strategies as well as the value proposition coming from the SEZs in the regions is, it's your latent marketing opportunity that you don't need to spend a lot of time and money on. What are the impediments for investment promotion efforts in South Africa? So the lack of awareness of these cross-cutting institutions and the knowledge that they have leads to investor fatigue and investor confusion. There is fierce competition for investment between SEZs sometimes, especially where their sectors align. But as some have similar value propositions, but we kind of flip that on the head by saying, recognizing that there is fierce competition in some sectors, but how do we then, so let's open up new markets. If we're all fighting for the one investor, for the one sector, nobody wins. And there's this race to the bottom that can happen. But if we actually turn around and say, how do we actually explore new markets, then we're actually doing ourselves an amazing opportunity there. Another impediment that was raised was small regions don't necessarily have the ability to offer the support service required in modern investment promotion. It takes on average 2 to 3 years to court an investor, depending on the size, whether a local company or an international company. And sometimes the smaller regions don't necessarily have the resources and the capacity to actually follow through, because after the investment promotion, there's the investment facilitation and then the aftercare. And at the end of the day, it is about building a long-term trusted relationship. So changing people and high turnover in staff can obviously also affect that ability to have that. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's give a big round of applause. Okay. And also, I would want to believe there's no one who will add to that excellent presentation. The last one is the number 4, which is the key determinants of a successful SEZ.
The first sub-question that we had to respond to was, what should the best and successful SEZ look like? And we were saying that you have to have this hub or this platform for innovation, and there needs to be almost cross-pollination with your more established industries, because SEZs are supposed to be breeding tomorrow's industrialists today. The role of SEZ is not just about attracting foreign direct investors, but it is also about creating a conducive environment such that we can breed tomorrow's industrialists today. We're saying within an SEZ, one of the most critical things that would be existing is that there would be a certain culture within management. You would have a strong management team that was driven by results. They were willing to try new things, and they would optimize every resource that was at their disposal. You would have an SEZ that has got locational advantage. So the sectors that they would select would be the sectors that their location would have an inherent locational advantage in. But we were saying that the measure of success of an IDZ would not just be those characteristics. It would be that it is a hive of activity, the employees working in and out of that SEZ every day. Because ultimately, a successful SEZ is one that has not created an enclave, but it is one whose effects and impacts can be felt by your local communities, and that can be felt by your local residents.
Okay, let's give them a big round of applause. Excellent work done. I think we'll use your inputs. Let me thank you for all the excellent presentations that were done this morning. Let's give ourselves a big, big round of applause. Can we welcome the DG of the DTI to do a vote of thanks?
Thanks, colleagues. Thanks for the simple job. I have to do a vote of thanks and make some closing. Colleagues, the idea was we must sharpen this tool of a SEZ. How do we really make the most and use this tool as effectively as you can. And what you've done over these past 2 days is for us to unpack how to really make this tool effective. So I take it that all those contributions are with that only aim in mind and so on. As you know, everybody wants development, everybody wants full employment, everybody wants to deal with our 30% unemployment rate, everybody wants to deal with policy, but we criticize the tools that we have. As soon as we come up with a tool, whether it's incentives, a motor industry program, black empowerment program, SEZ program, industrial parks, we immediately face pressure to close down that program. As you know, when the automotive program is now 25 years old, passed in Madiba's cabinet, from day one, when Paul and the minister then, Alec Irwin, pushed this program, Treasury, the IMF, the World Bank, the press in South Africa, and all the commentators said we must close down the program. Mr. President Mandela, that is corporate welfare. It's a subsidy. Why do you want such a program? So we were about to close it down. Similarly with SEZs now, with Coega itself, many times Coega was going to be closed down. They want to fire the management and so on, because every time they say, you've got this SEZ, but unemployment is 60%. And you try to, instead of saying, let's have 20 Coegas, they want to close down the one thing which is producing it. So colleagues, we have to persevere with this program. It's a tool. It's one of many tools. Use the tool, change it, adapt it, make it work, mark a plan, whatever. But please, your one tool is not going to solve all our problems. Don't expect this tool to solve the unemployment problem. But at least try to bring in 100 investors or 50 investors or create 5,000 jobs or 10,000 jobs. That's your unique contribution to the big problem.
Thank you. Those who have enlisted their names for the tour will also get ready likewise.
Coega SEZ, we actually using it as a success model as a country. Coega SEZ, it's undoubtedly the biggest special economic zone in the country. It's the biggest economic zone on the African continent. I've visited many countries in Africa with special economic zone. It's not a match. This is the kind of a model that we've developed in terms of the new approach. As I've said, the new model will be centered around ecosystem, will be centered around the district model. So the kind of SEZ that we have here at Coega, for example, now we are at the conference center. This is the kind of model that we're developing. Previously, it was a non-starter to mention that we want residential area in a special economic zone. People, they were narrowly focusing on just mere industrial parks. But now, I think with the narrative that we've pushed to say that when we develop a special economic zone, you need a place where you can live, play, and work. This is the kind of a model. Coega resonates with that. Coega is actually the kind of model that I would say it's what we seek to develop as a country.
Coming back from the site visit was really inspiring. As one of the newer SEZs in the program, we look to the leaders in our space, Coega, Dubai, London. And so the lessons shared over the past 2 days here at the conference has been quite inspiring and fills me with motivation and energy for the work that we have to do in Saldanha. So I'm quite impressed with the offering from Coega.